They say they love your light, but watch closely. The moment you shine, something in their eyes changes. The smile falters. The warmth cools. The words stay kind, but the energy turns sharp, subtle, invisible, unmistakable. What they call love was never admiration. It was containment. There's a law that no one speaks of, a forbidden law of human relationships. The more authentic you are, the more you awaken resentment in those who live behind masks. You felt it, haven't you? That moment you shared something real, and the air changed. The conversation turned thin, their eyes glazed with discomfort. You started scanning yourself for what you said wrong, as if honesty were a crime you needed to apologize for. You've been the one who senses the energy shift before the words follow, the one who makes yourself smaller to protect the room from your truth, the one who feels the temperature drop when your peace stops entertaining their chaos. That's not in your head. It's the shadow reacting to light. Carl Jung wrote that, wherever light appears, the shadow sharpens. He didn't just mean good versus evil. He meant that truth itself is provocative. That clarity, emotional, moral, or spiritual, exposes what others refuse to see. To live honestly is to become a mirror. And mirrors don't always inspire gratitude. Sometimes they inspire hate, because to those who survive through illusion, your authenticity feels like violence. Your calm looks like judgment. Your peace exposes their unrest. And your sensitivity, the very thing you once thought made you weak, becomes the light that burns their denial. That's why the kindest souls so often find themselves walking alone, why you can be surrounded by people, yet feel the temperature drop every time you stop performing. You're not being punished, you're being revealed. When you stop dimming your light, you stop protecting other people's shadows. And that's when they show you who they really are. Not because they changed, but because you stopped shrinking. The truth is simple, but it's not safe. Love, in its unconscious form, always wants control. And the moment you become self-possessed, you threaten every unhealed person who depended on your compliance. So they'll say you've changed. They'll say you've grown cold. But what really happened is that you stopped mistaking fear for love and silence for peace. This is not a personal failing. It's a law of psyche. Wherever one soul begins to individuate, the collective resists. Because light, true unapologetic light, doesn't just illuminate the path forward. It exposes everything that was hiding in the dark. So if your presence provokes discomfort, if your growth is met with distance, if your truth feels like too much for those who once claimed to love you, don't doubt yourself. The shadow sharpens when light appears, and your light is the proof that theirs still exists. Empathy is not kindness, it's clairvoyance born from survival. As a child, you learned to read danger in the twitch of an eyebrow, in the way footsteps sounded down the hall. You learned that silence wasn't peace, it was the storm before the shouting. You learned to listen for tones, not words, to track energy, not logic. And long before you had language for it, your body became your intuition. It mapped emotional weather patterns like constellations, where every sigh meant something, and every look carried a message that only you seemed to hear. This is how empaths are made, not through magic, but through hypervigilance, through the nervous system's genius attempt to keep you alive. You became an antenna for emotion, a translator of tension, a peacekeeper in the battlefield of unspoken chaos. And over time, that vigilance, that sensitivity, became your identity. It became the gift everyone praised and the burden no one understood. You were the one who could feel the pain others hid, the one who could calm a room with a look, the one who never stopped giving, because to stop felt dangerous. They told you it was empathy, but it was survival, refined into art. You didn't just feel others, you became them. You learn to dissolve your edges to keep the peace, and in doing so you lost track of where you ended and everyone else began. It's why you can sense tension that hasn't been spoken, why you know when someone's lying even if they're smiling, why being in a crowd feels like drowning in invisible noise. Your light, the quiet way you understand, the way you feel without asking, was forged in the dark. Every empath carries a history of absorption, a child who had to feel everything because feeling was safer than not knowing. But here's the paradox. The very gift that kept you safe is the same one that now threatens your peace, because that sensitivity doesn't turn off when the danger ends. It becomes luminosity, a presence so alive it unsettles those who've spent their lives numbing themselves. Your light reveals what others repress. Your emotional fluency exposes their disconnection, and so unconsciously they resent what they also crave. They reach for your warmth, then recoil when it burns away their illusions. The empath is a candle in a dark room. Everyone gathers around for comfort, but no one wonders what it costs to keep burning. You carry a sensitivity that radiates, a nervous system tuned not just to your own soul, but to the unspoken ache in everyone else's. And yet, that same light can become your prison when you forget it's allowed to illuminate you too. Jung wrote that the wound becomes a window. He meant that what once broke you open is also how the light gets in. But what he didn't say is this: that same wound is also how your light escapes. And unless you learn to contain it, to hold your own energy as sacred, the world will keep drinking from you and calling it love. Envy is not jealousy. Jealousy wants what you have. Envy wants you smaller, quieter, dimmer, because every time you shine, you remind them of everything they abandoned to feel safe. This is the hidden law of the shadow. It does not crave your possessions. It craves your diminishment. Your light exposes what they buried to survive, and instead of awakening, they attack the mirror. When you walk into a room with presence, you become a silent confrontation. You say nothing, but your existence whispers, "You could be more than this." And the unconscious hears it like a threat. They don't hate your light, they hate the reflection it forces, because your peace exposes their noise, your sensitivity highlights their numbness, your truth reminds them of every mask they've glued in place. And so begins the slow poison of resentment, the serpent of envy coiling between affection and sabotage. They'll praise your warmth in public and quietly resent how easily others orbit you. They'll say you're too sensitive, too intense, too much. Not because you are, but because your authenticity burns through the fabric of their performance. The truth is, light provokes rebellion in the unawakened. When you radiate without permission, you remind others of how much they've dimmed to belong. And the psyche does not forgive the one who makes it conscious of its own imprisonment. You become the mirror they want to shatter.
If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.
Jung called this projection, the mind's way of outsourcing what it can't bear to see. They take their unlived life, their rage, their longing, their unexpressed potential, and cast it onto you. So they call you arrogant for walking in truth, cold for setting boundaries, selfish for finally choosing yourself. But what they really mean is this: you're living the life I was too afraid to claim. And in that moment, love becomes something else, a banquet of ashes, where affection exists but nourishment does not. You start to notice it, the way their compliments taste like subtle corrections, the way their closeness carries the faint scent of control. It's the intimacy of performance, a counterfeit connection that demands you keep playing your part. Because in every unconscious relationship, someone must stay small for the bond to feel stable. And when you stop performing that role, the entire illusion begins to fracture. But here's the paradox. The empath is not weak for triggering resentment. You are not too much. You are medicine. Your presence is exposure therapy for the collective shadow. You show people what they've denied in themselves. You awaken the self they buried under conformity, fear, and obedience. And that kind of light will always be met with resistance before reverence. Remember, the brighter the flame, the sharper the shadows it casts. And the serpent of envy only coils around those who carry something sacred. So when someone resents your radiance, don't shrink to soothe them. Understand what's really happening. Their soul is in revolt against its own reflection. The truth doesn't destroy relationships. It only destroys the ones built on illusion. And that's what happens when an empath stops performing. The entire theatre of false harmony begins to crumble. For years, you played your role perfectly. The peacemaker. The one who said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. The one who apologized just to restore calm. The one who held everyone's emotions like fragile glass, while no one noticed you were bleeding. You thought love meant tolerance. You thought connection meant endurance. You thought keeping the peace was the same as being safe. But peace built on suppression is not peace. It's paralysis. And when you finally break the script, when you stop absorbing, fixing, explaining, you become unrecognizable to the system that fed on your compliance. That's why they say you've changed. Because their comfort depended on your self-abandonment. Your silence kept the illusion intact. Your self-sacrifice made them feel good about their own avoidance. But the moment you choose truth over harmony, the mask begins to crack. You'll see it in their eyes first. Confusion, then anger, then fear. Because when the empath stops orbiting around other people's wounds, everyone loses gravity. The false peace collapses, the unspoken hierarchy dissolves, and what's left is reality, raw, unscripted, undeniable. It's a strange kind of freedom, isn't it? The first breath after years of holding it in, it burns. Because real air always burns lungs accustomed to smoke. When you stop shrinking, the projections have nowhere to go. So they come back home, to their rightful owners. And most people don't survive that mirror. That's why truth-tellers are exiled. Not because they're cruel, but because they break the collective spell. The empath's evolution exposes everyone else's stagnation. Your awakening is their reckoning. And for those who've built their safety on denial, you become the villain. This is what I call the collapse of false harmony, the sacred moment when the counterfeit peace disintegrates, and the cost of pretending finally outweighs the fear of being real. It's messy, it's lonely, but it's also pure, because for the first time, you're no longer negotiating your existence. You're not performing peace, you are peace. And there's a difference. Jung said that the process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, feels like destruction at first, because everything false must die before the real can live. That's the price of authenticity. You will lose your audience, but you will find your voice. And when you do, the silence that once terrified you becomes the sanctuary that saves you. Now, let's turn the mirror around. Because this is where most stories about empaths stop. They end with validation. But healing begins with awareness. You see, not all light is innocent, and not all giving is pure. You call it compassion, but sometimes it's a need to be needed. You call it forgiveness, but sometimes it's fear of abandonment. You call it empathy, but sometimes it's control disguised as love. That's the shadow of the empath, the place where your pain and your purpose blur, where saving others keeps you from saving yourself. For years you thought your sensitivity was your gift, and it is. But beneath that gift lives a wound that whispers, if I can make them feel better, maybe I'll finally feel safe. This is what Jung called the wounded healer, the one who helps others to avoid confronting their own suffering. You became fluent in everyone else's pain, but illiterate in your own. That's why you attract people who secretly resent you, because your light feeds them. But their resentment feeds you too. It keeps your role intact, the savior, the fixer, the martyr. You say, they drain me, but sometimes you needed to be drained, because as long as you were rescuing them, you didn't have to face your own emptiness. This is what I call the shadow contract, an unspoken agreement between two wounded souls. One promises to need, the other promises to save. One stays powerless, the other stays useful. It's not cruelty, it's chemistry, the unconscious seeking balance through imbalance. You were trained from childhood to equate love with labor, to believe that care must cost you something, to think that peace can only exist when everyone else is happy, even if you aren't. And so you attract people who confirm that story, the takers, the avoiders, the quietly envious. They keep you trapped in the same emotional economy you were raised in, where your worth depends on what you give, and your safety depends on who you please. This is the cruel irony. Your light was never the problem. It's the contract that needs to die. Because as long as you unconsciously agree to absorb other people's pain, the universe will keep sending you those who demand it. It's not punishment, it's pattern. The psyche repeats until it becomes conscious. And here's the moment of truth. Healing doesn't mean dimming your light. It means burning the contract that keeps you from using it on yourself. You can love deeply without losing shape. You can care without collapsing. You can hold space for others without vanishing into it. Your empathy isn't your weakness. It's your initiation. But it can only become wisdom once it stops needing to save to feel seen. Because the ultimate act of empathy is finally extending it to the one person you've always left out of it. You. There comes a moment when even the kindest heart realizes love without boundaries isn't love. It's leakage, and that's the threshold every empath must cross. For most of your life, you mistook absorption for connection. You thought feeling everything meant you cared enough, that carrying others' pain made you good, that exhaustion was proof of love. But this isn't empathy, it's entanglement. Walls are fear, boundaries are art. To guard your light is not cruelty, it's devotion to the divine spark within you. Because true empathy doesn't dissolve you, it illuminates you. It's the fire of consciousness, not the flood of collapse. Prometheus was punished for bringing fire to humanity, the light of awareness, the gift of divine sight. Every empath knows that punishment, the price of carrying wisdom before others are ready for it. Echo loved Narcissus so completely, she disappeared trying to be heard, her voice fading into the distance, a warning to every soul who mistakes reflection for reciprocity. And Psyche, lighting the forbidden lamp, saw what love truly was for the first time. Not illusion, not shadow, but truth. And in that light, she stopped being a victim of her longing and became the keeper of her own perception. Each of these myths tells the same story, the empath's awakening from sacrifice into sovereignty. The moment you stop begging to be understood and start becoming so whole that misunderstanding no longer shakes you. This is what it means to move from absorption to sovereignty. You stop being the mirror and become the flame itself. You no longer carry the emotions of others, you witness them without drowning in them. You stop mistaking empathy for obligation. You stop confusing guilt with goodness. This is not detachment, it's divinity. Awareness anchored in discernment. Because empathy, at its highest form, is not a reflex. It's a choice. It's no longer, I feel your pain, so I'll absorb it. It becomes, I see your pain, and I'll stay centered enough to hold space for it, without losing myself. That's how your gift becomes gold. When your compassion stops being compulsive and starts being conscious. When your care becomes clarity. When your love becomes law. You're not here to be everyone's healer. You're here to become whole enough that your very being reminds others what wholeness looks like. This is sovereignty, not the end of empathy, but its evolution. Because the light you've been protecting all this time was never meant to save the world. It was meant to illuminate it. You will always provoke envy in those who refuse to feel, but that's not your curse. It's your calling. Because when you carry light into a world that worships numbness, you don't just illuminate, you expose. You show what wholeness looks like. You remind others of everything they abandoned to stay comfortable. And some will love you for it, but others will hate you for the same reason. That's not failure. That's impact. You are the mirror of possibility. And mirrors don't discriminate. They simply reveal. Some will shatter when they see themselves too clearly. Others will awaken. But none will remain unchanged. That's what your presence does. It stirs the unconscious. You are not too sensitive. You are what the unconscious fears most. Awareness that can't be controlled. So let them resent your light. It only proves how bright it is. Because envy is not proof that you've done something wrong. It's evidence that you've done something brave. You've chosen authenticity in a world addicted to imitation. You've chosen to feel where others have chosen to freeze. Jung called this individuation, the sacred separation from the collective hypnosis into the sovereignty of your own soul. True empathy doesn't absorb pain, it transforms it. It sees the wound but doesn't become it. It touches the shadow but never loses the flame. And that's what you are now. Not the healer who breaks for everyone else, but the sovereign who burns clean. You've learned the difference between being kind and being consumed, between being open and being emptied, between being light and being lit. The ones who once resented your radiance will one day realize it was never an accusation. It was an invitation to meet themselves, to wake up, to remember. And whether they ever do or not, that's no longer your burden to carry. Because the story ends here. You no longer walk into rooms scanning for danger. You walk in radiating safety. You no longer dim to fit their eyes. You let them adjust to your glow. So stand tall, breathe deeply, and remember this, you were never too much. They were simply not ready to see. Tell me, what's one part of yourself you've been dimming to keep others comfortable? Every awakening begins with one sentence of truth. If this is yours, write it below. I made peace with my light. Because true strength isn't about shining without shadow. It's about shining through it. Your empathy isn't your weakness. It's proof you survived the darkness and didn't become it.